Scream 7, the most controversial movie of 2026, has finally arrived, and despite all of that bad press and publicity we've been getting over the last year, Neve Campbell rejoined center stage as our final girl. Kevin Williamson, the dude that wrote the best movies in this series, has directing duties this time around, so I'd like to think that they knew that they had no other choice but to deliver us up a banger with this one. So what happened? Your boy wants to know. So Scream 7 is obviously the 7th installment in this horror slasher franchise. And the story goes like this. When a new Ghostface killer emerges in the quiet town where Sidney Prescott has built a new life, her darkest fears are realized as her daughter becomes the next target. Determined to protect her family, Sidney must face the horrors of her past to put an end to the bloodshed once and for all. Okay, so as a big horror movie guy and slasher fan, I obviously like a good deal of these Scream movies, but the big caveat there is that it's when they're handled and executed correctly. By that I mean that this entire movie franchise's shtick is that it's super meta. So there's a fine line between when the dialogue is smartly written and when everything just comes off as totally cringe. So I mean, I look at movies like Scream 1, Scream 2, even Scream 5 has its moments from time to time. I think pretty much everything else somehow finds a way to push the concept too far while also just being redundant as all hell in the process. So if saying movies like 3, 4, and 6 don't exactly hit the mark is bad, then lock me up and throw away the key, my guy, because I'm going straight to jail. Now look, I would be lying if I said that I didn't at least have a sliver of hope for this film, just because Neve Campbell was back as Sidney Prescott, our final girl, and Kevin Williamson, the guy that ruled the 90s with slasher film scripts, is back manning the franchise, albeit in a director role this time. But it's becoming more and more clear that the cardinal rule should be that if your name is not Wes Craven, you probably shouldn't even try to make one of these things, because I wasn't a huge fan. When it comes to the story they decided to go with in this one, like I said earlier, so many of these films rely off just being insanely and over-the-top meta, but in the most tasteful and smart way possible. Well, this is probably the least meta movie we've ever gotten in the Scream franchise, making it come off much more as just a generic and run-of-the-mill slasher film than a true Scream film. Obviously, that's pretty disappointing. Now, I can admit that it kind of makes sense as a natural progression after all these years to have one of these films following Sidney Prescott and her future family, continuing that line of final girl characters with even her own daughter, but they just didn't really do anything all that interesting with it. The daughter dresses like Sidney Prescott. The daughter does theater like Sidney Prescott. The daughter has a boyfriend climbing through the house window like Sidney Prescott. Like, what are we doing here? I'm getting nostalgia baited to high heaven with this film. I actually like the cold open of this movie with the Mocker house being turned into this big like Airbnb attraction. I thought that was pretty entertaining. And I understand these movies are doing everything in their power to be timely and topical. But when I saw that AI and deepfakes were going to be a big plot point this time around, it just made me kind of roll my eyes and detach from the whole scenario, because I don't think that's very smart. It's not very creative, and it ends up leading to one of the most nonsensical and unsatisfying killer reveals in the history of the entire franchise. There are some few and far between moments where it does feel like the story is trying to connect itself together and do something interesting, but straight up, your boy is not a happy camper when it comes to this department. It's no bueno. When it comes to the performances in this movie, I really think there's only one performance in here that's worth writing home about. That's obviously Neve Campbell as Sidney Prescott, our final girl, one of the best that we've ever had in the slasher genre. And I mean, this is her 6th time doing this role now. It's just so easy to see her as this character. She falls right back into those old patterns, and she's just entertaining to watch in this role. Also, I won't wade into spoiler territory here when it comes to the actual capacity that this character is being utilized in the film, but this movie obviously marks the long-awaited return of Matthew Lillard as Stu Macher, one of the original Ghostface killers in Scream 1. And I enjoyed his presence in this movie. I think maybe he was still a little over the top and too goofy for my liking. Like, it's still Stu Macher, but it's like if Stu Macher did one too many whippets before walking back on set. Everyone else just not doing anything all that great or interesting. I mean, there are definitely some jokes that land flat here. The killers are offering up some awful line reads along the way. Admittedly, a lot of that is the script's fault, but it's just not a fun thing to experience when you're actively trying to like a movie that you've enjoyed past entries in the franchise. McKenna Grace, I mean, she continues her hot streak of just being in every franchise ever. She does fine with the limited role that she has in this film, but overall, you're not going to leave the theater being like, yeah, the acting was totally the high point of that film. Now, seeing that this is a slasher movie, we obviously have to touch on the tension and some of the brutal murders that are taking place over the course of this story. And outside of like 2 particular deaths, there isn't really anything that brutal, grisly, or memorable when you compare it to some of the better Scream movies earlier in the franchise. And it's not like this movie doesn't put Ghostface into positions where he could get creative and put out some interesting kills. I mean, my guy's ready to go out there and strut his stuff, but unfortunately, I think it comes down to Kevin Williamson here, just not being an experienced director. He doesn't have the eye of someone like Wes Craven or Radio Silence. So the kills and murders on display just like aren't memorable, aren't that creative or compelling in the slightest. But still, I want it on record that I did say earlier, there are 2 kills that I do think put off that vintage Scream Ghostface energy. One's in the cold open, one takes place in a tavern. So I have no problem admitting that. I'm not just like a generational hater for the love of the game. All in all though, I do think this movie was lacking in that aspect when it comes to this entry. Obviously not something I wanted to say about a Scream movie where I'm sitting down trying to see some slicing and dicing. Overall, guys, Scream 7 is nowhere near as smartly written, well-paced, or entertaining as some of the previous entries in this franchise. Having Neve Campbell back as the main character is obviously a welcome development, and there are a few fun moments along the way, but the story is unsatisfying. There are only a couple of memorable kills, and to top it all off with arguably the worst killer reveal the franchise has ever seen, and this series might need to go the way of the dodo. Wes Craven, you are sorely missed here, buddy. Scream 7 gets a Sully score of 2 stars. So that's my review of the latest Scream movie. What do you think is the best slasher film that we've gotten in recent years? I think I probably have to go with X from Ty West. Love that one, and Mia Goth absolutely kills it in that dual role. But let me know in the comments below what you think. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and I'll see you guys at the next one.